Joining us on the State of the Nation today, we have Phil Craig, the co-founder and leader of the Referendum Party. Now, you may have seen in the news, the Referendum Party, they plan on challenging for Cape independence, that is, for the Western Cape to become independent from the rest of the wonderful Republic of South Africa. Phil, welcome to the State of the Nation. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and a pleasure to be with you.
Now, let's get straight into it. Referendum Party, the idea floated a few years ago, a secession, I suppose, of the Western Cape from the rest of the country. You obviously, there's going to be two schools of thought on this: people that love the idea and people that laugh at the idea, I'd imagine.
Sure.
And you think that you're going to get enough people to like the idea?
Sure. Look, so as you say, it's not a new idea, and the Referendum Party has come out of an organisation called the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, or the CIAG, which I've been involved in for several years. We've lobbied extensively. We've worked inside of with the main political parties. Ultimately, we secured an agreement from the DA in 2021 to hold a referendum on Cape independence, or hold a referendum which included a question on Cape independence. Ultimately, they reneged on that deal after the elections, and we always said, look, if you renege on that deal, then we're going to put up a referendum party, and we'll try and force you to hold a referendum and consult the people of the Western Cape on this issue. And when they reneged on that deal, we put up the referendum party, and here we are. And we're trying to force the DA below 50% in the Western Cape into a Cape independence coalition, where we can then make sure that we do get a referendum. And polling shows that 68% of people in the Western Cape support the holding of a referendum on Cape independence.
Now, do you think an independent Cape is feasible?
Absolutely, yes. So without question, it's feasible. I mean, you've got a population of 7 million people, which is a decent-sized country. The Western Cape has got an economy that's roughly the same size as Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe combined. The Western Cape is a net contributor to the South African fiscus. So economically, we've got this really viable country. And ideologically, there's no doubt that the Western Cape has a different ideology to the rest of South Africa. And we can see that from 30 years of election results. And bear in mind that voters in the Western Cape, the majority, have never once voted for the DA. So if you think of yourself as a Western Cape voter, for 30 years, you've never been governed by the party you voted for. You've got no realistic prospect of ever being governed by the party that you voted for. You really dislike the party that you're being governed by, and you're having its ideology forced upon you against your will. So effectively, you've got a system that just doesn't work for the Western Cape. And that is the ethos of Cape independence. We're better off to make our own decisions. We don't want to fall out with South Africa. We just want to say, look, you go your way, we'll go ours. We can be neighbours, we can be trading partners, and you be governed according to the democratic will of the people in South Africa, and we'll be governed according to the democratic will of the people in the Western Cape. And we believe we'll be better off that. And again, polling shows that something like 70%, I can't remember the exact number, of people in the Western Cape believe that their lives will be fundamentally better off in an independent Western Cape.
Now, what you're referring to when you say people in the Western Cape have never got the government that they voted for, you're referring to the fact that, and it's not strictly true to say that the DA has always governed in the Western Cape. That's a relatively new phenomenon, 15 years by my reckoning. You're saying that, in half of the time of the new South Africa, people in the Western Cape have preferred the DA, but yet you've got an ANC national government. That's what you're referring to. In actual fact, your problem is with the ANC and the way they run South Africa. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that is true. So what I'm saying is that in 30 years, the majority of people have never, ever voted for the ANC. So since 1994 to now, we've had a national government, which has been the ANC throughout. And statistically, the majority of people in the Western Cape have never, ever voted for the ANC. The highest the ANC ever got was 44% of the vote. They did form a minority government. So, and I think we have to be careful to not just make this about the ANC. The ANC is the symptom but it's not the cause. The cause is that the Western Cape people are not electing their own government, and they're being governed by a party that they've rejected. It happens to be the ANC now, and obviously the ANC are very good at illustrating what the problem is. But I mean, let's imagine that an EFF government is elected instead of the ANC. It's not like suddenly the ANC being gone, the problem's gone away. It's this difference in ideology, and fundamentally there are a number of those. But one of the most pressing ones is that the Western Cape is habitually pursues genuine non-racialism, which is supposed to be the foundation of the South African constitution. And obviously within South Africa, we increasingly have this racial nationalism that's been driven in the rest of South Africa, which really is not beneficial to anybody. But we can't, there's nothing we can do about the rest of South Africa, because in the Western Cape, we don't vote for the government of the rest of South Africa. But what we can do is fight for this non-racialism and a more market-orientated economy in the Western Cape, which actually is progressive and develops jobs and prosperity to all of the people of the Western Cape.
So by using your own logic, you can take it to a different conclusion. There are many people in the rest of the country that haven't voted for the ANC either. Should they also be calling for secession? Well, so it's a different. So then it comes down to what do the majority want. So I get that, and I think it's one of these situations where look, South Africa is a hodgepodge. It's a hodgepodge that's never really worked. In what's the history of South Africa? In 113 years, the imperialist and colonialist British imposed a solution with the Boers on South Africa and promptly ran it for their own benefit for a while. Then we ended up with a national party, and now you had Afrikaners who basically oppressed everybody but large sections of the population. And now we have the ANC who are pretty well ruining it for everybody. So South Africa as a construct just never really worked in its entire history. Somebody has always been getting the rough end of the wedge. Now, how do we solve that? Well, I think we start off in the Western Cape. It's easy. We're in a slightly different situation in that the majority are opposed to that. So therefore, we can kind of have a relatively simplistic solution. We've got an electorate, we've got a border, we've got a parliament, we've got our own constitution. We're the only province that does. So actually, for the Western Cape people to stand up and say, well, this just doesn't work for us and we kind of want to be out and do our own thing is relatively easy. If you are in the rest of South Africa and you also don't vote for the ANC, but you have a minority view, it's much more difficult. And I have great sympathy for people who are trapped in South Africa as minorities, ideological minorities I'm talking about now, and who effectively can't vote out the ANC. That there will need to be other solutions elsewhere. And I hope we find them. And to a certain extent, we're seeing that. We're going to see a coalition government probably in KZN, which is going to be dominated by the IFP with the DA, and that's likely to provide some slightly different solutions in KZN. We're probably going to see in Gauteng a more business-friendly type government emerge at a provincial level. So we are going to start to see other solutions outside of Cape independence emerging. But what we're going to see is the breaking down of this dominant central government, which just dictates policy to everybody, which has been a disaster throughout South Africa's entire history. Now, if you mentioned KZN, which could definitely fall out of the control of the ANC, and there's Gauteng, in fact, looks even worse for the ANC. Should all of these provinces start asking to secede? Will we start having the Gauteng Independence Party and the KZN Independence Party?
Well, I think that's a decision for the people of Gauteng and the people of KZN. I mean, actually, ironically, there is a KZN Independence Party, and there's certainly been noises over the last few years from within the sort of the Zulu royal household around secession. But I mean, that's the whole point of democracy is that's a decision for the people of KZN to make. And what we're seeing is, in these two, let's imagine those three provinces. Let's imagine we end up with the Western Cape out and continuing not to be controlled by the ANC, Gauteng and KZN. But you're going to have three parts of the country that have rejected the ANC, but they've rejected them in fundamentally different ways. I mean, what do the IFP want? They want a greater role for traditional African justice. They want the monarchy. They want a relatively conservative African society, and they're entitled to want that. And in the Western Cape, you've got people wanting market economy, liberalism, broadly Cape liberalism, and non-racialism. So you've got these fundamentally different sets of values. And why would we try to find a compromise in this massive country that's half the size of Europe, and has been forced together, artificially, as opposed to saying, well, look, in that region, you should be governed according to the will of the people who live there. And in this region, we should be governed according to the will of the people who live here. And if we're going to cooperate, when we should cooperate on the basis of us reaching some mutual agreement that we're all happy with, as opposed to some other central government that we didn't elect dictating terms to us, regardless of what we voted for.
Now let's get real for a second. The Western Cape, wonderfully developed place, all very nice infrastructure that is cared for and all of that. But the bulk of it has been built thanks to the earnings of the entire country. The Western Cape, in fact, has been a moderate contributor to the fiscus over the years, right? If you really break it down, the wealth of South Africa has been built on the back of mining, which very little happens in the Western Cape, right? That is where the railroads and the roads and the infrastructure that exists, the street lights, etc., that exist in the Western Cape comes from. So, in essence, you can say that, it's not like the Western Cape built it. In actual fact, if you look at their tax take compared to their tax spend, right, only now they're reaching parity.
Yeah, look, that's not the case, actually. So the Western Cape houses currently, I think, 11.8% of the population. It's increasing slightly. The Western Cape produces 14% of South Africa's GDP. It houses 15.4% of South Africa's taxpayers, and actually, in the money that's allocated to provinces, it gets just over 10% back. So the Western Cape is a net contributor to South Africa. It has been for a very, very long time. There are only two provinces that pay into the South African system: Gauteng and then the Western Cape. So the Western Cape absolutely has paid its own way, and there are people who argue, so well, hang on a second, those assets that the Western Cape has have been paid for by South African taxpayers. But if you want to follow down that route, then there's a whole lot of assets in South Africa that are being paid by Western Cape taxpayers. And since we've been paying over our share for the entire 30 years of South Africa's democratic history, if we're going to make an addy up on that calculation, then the rest of South Africa is going to owe us money when we leave, and not the other way around.
Now, Phil, I suppose the big question is, do you really think that this is a fight worth having? I can only put it by using this comparison. I recently had the leader of the Democratic Alliance up here in Gauteng, Solium Simanga, and Helen Zille, for that fact, trying to propose the most daft idea, and that is, because we've got an impasse in Joburg and a very bad coalition that governs Johannesburg, they say we shouldn't work hard to form a coalition to get these people out. We should re-vote. Now, that's never going to happen, and neither is your referendum, right? It's just not going to happen, right? Absolutely zero chance. Don't you think that you are absolutely wasting time and resources on this frivolous idea?
No, absolutely don't. I think it absolutely is going to happen. I think ultimately you can only hide from the democratic will of a people for so long, and I think it's absolutely essential that it does happen. So we've got this situation where 68% of people in the Western Cape support this referendum, 79% amongst DA voters, and the only question is at this point in time, the reason we don't have a referendum, which was promised and agreed, I personally agreed that with John Steenhuisen, and the DA have reneged on that agreement. So we now have to force them again, and that's the whole point of the referendum party. But ultimately, absolutely, and it's more than that. It's essential, because if we look forward and we say, well, what's South Africa going to look like in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? At this point in time, it's only going in one direction. So this isn't a luxury. This is a matter of survival for the people of the Western Cape, and we have to say what is in our best interest: to remain a part of a system which is a collapsing state that's badly managed, where we don't have a democratic will, or casting out and actually being well governed and creating a prosperous future for all the people of the Western Cape. The referendum is the key to that. And people often sort of say, look, they tried to paint independence as some kind of ridiculous notion. Bear in mind, in the last 50 years, there have been 81 independence referendums around the world. On average, one every 7 months, an election is taking place. And I think it's 35 countries, go I'm slightly wrong, have got their independence in the last 50 years, an average of one every 17 months. So people must remember that countries breaking up is happening the whole time. It's a natural part of the evolution of the history. And if we look at a map of the world 100 years ago, it looks completely different to what we have now. And if we looked at a map 120 years old, South Africa isn't even on it. So I think it absolutely is realistic, absolutely is deliverable. I think it's become a popular idea to sort of dismiss it as idiocy, but it absolutely isn't. And bear in mind that our work in the CIA, we've been absolutely at the heart of government. We're not. This isn't just. I'm an absolute pragmatist. I'm not an idealist, and we've been involved. I was responsible for setting up the Western Cape Devolution Working Group that brought together all of the political parties in the Western Cape who wanted devolution. I was the person who led the team that wrote the Western Cape People's Bill that the Freedom Front Plus tabled in the Western Cape Parliament. I negotiated the referendum, albeit that now has been reneged upon. So these, we're not doing this from a fanciful notion. We absolutely have been at the heart of Western Cape politics, and this is an issue that is far bigger than people reason. One of the reasons why is that many of the newspapers deliberately avoid talking about Cape independence. So actually you get this slightly false sense of what's going on in the Western Cape because the papers are just, the media houses are deliberately avoiding this subject. But under that surface, this is a subject that's not going away. And increasingly you're starting to see more and more, this weekend when the EFF had their conference or whatever it was in the Western Cape, they felt they had to address Cape independence. Yesterday, a DA donor came out and said, Alan Windy, you need to debate Phil Craig over this issue. I have given you millions of rands, and actually I want to hear the answer to these questions, because we were saying to Windy, stop complaining about all of these things that are going wrong in the Western Cape, because you can fix them. Just call the referendum. And actually, all of these things that you're complaining about, as if you're this innocent victim, you're not actually an innocent victim. You're complicit because you're denying the people of the Western Cape a referendum that the majority of them want, and you have the constitutional power to call.
Yeah, they may have a constitutional power to call a referendum, but obviously it's going to be subject to a national referendum.
Why would that be the case?
Because it's part of the Republic of South Africa. The constitution would need to be changed, and as we all know, that's going to take 75% of support to do. I don't see how it could ever be done.
Okay, so unfortunately, look, I have to say that's completely incorrect. So the constitution allows premiers to call provincial referendums, and if you look around
based on their secession.
So, well, absolutely. Look, so if you look at real world, and this is ironically, this is something that Alan Windy referred to in Parliament and incorrectly. And one of the things we challenged him is to say, okay, Alan. So Alan claimed that any referendum would have to be a national referendum, and I said, Alan, go and find us one single example, just one, of those 81 referendums that have taken place around the world in the last 50 years. Find me one single example where the whole of the region, the whole country voted rather than the seceding territory. And he can't produce one, because every one of those 81 referendums was just the seceding territory. And that's logical, because what is this based on? It's based on the right of self-determination, of people deciding for themselves how they want to be governed. You can't ask somebody else what they want in self-determination. That isn't self-determination. Well, actually, it's not determination. It becomes imperialism if you're not careful. So the decision for the Western Cape is for the Western Cape alone to make. This will be a provincial referendum, and it is allowed for in the South African Constitution. It's allowed for in international law, and it's the international norm. And as I say, there are 81 examples to prove it in the last 50 years, and not one single example to say that that's not the case.
The 81 you keep on referring to is a bit of a mischievous number, because the bulk of that comes from the breakup of the Soviet Union and the breakup of certain countries that were put together by force in living memory. We're not talking about a place that has been, unified for 130 years or whatever, South Africa since
113 years is a blink in the terms of history, and actually those and I think it's a misnomer to say, look, some of those are from the Soviet Union, some of those are from Yugoslavia, the old Yugoslavia, and then you've got some of those are the sort of last thrashings of colonialism. But I mean, then you also have first world countries. Scotland's had a referendum, Quebec's had a referendum. So you have to look at that. not the case. Actually, this is this normal cycle of events of people wanting to exercise this right of self-determination, which has been increasingly strengthened in international law throughout the 20th century and now into the 21st century. So, yeah, self-determination is becoming a more powerful right and more and more recognised as it's now a just Hogan's right. It's undeniable. And South Africa has signed 3 international treaties since 1994, all of which guarantee the right of self-determination. And in fact, the ANC government is constantly speaking out about the rights of self-determination of others. It's just not very good at recognising that people within its own country also have that right.
Now, you styled your Cape Referendum party on, God forbid, Nigel Farage and the Brexit movement. Could you not have found a better example? I mean, what's your view as somebody that was formerly part of that country? Brexit seems to have not necessarily been the best idea ever for Britain.
Well, look, so first of all, let's take the second part first. My view is that Brexit was a success, but it was a success for democracy. Whether it's going to be an economic success, we'll have to remain to see. But actually, why do I say it's a success? Well, because the people of the UK were democratically consulted on an issue and made a decision. And whether they made the right decision or the wrong decision is for them to determine. But at least what you did have was democracy, and that was an expression of democracy. From that point of view, that is best practice. Ask the people what it is that they want. Why have we styled ourselves in many ways on Brexit? Is because there's some striking similarities between Brexit and our movement. So a lot of secessionist movements, and perhaps the majority, are conducted where the provincial government supports secession. So if you go to Quebec, the Quebecan government supported secession. You go to Scotland, the Scottish government supported secession. You go to Catalonia, the Catalonian government supported secession. So therefore, and often in those countries, they're fighting for the referendum because they don't have this right to call the referendum themselves. In the Brexit scenario, which wasn't actually a true secession, it was different. The Brexit part. So what you had in Brexit, the Brexit party wasn't trying to get political power, or UKIP before that. It wasn't trying to run the government. It was it recognised that the Conservative Party, which was the British government, its voters wanted a Brexit referendum. And even though the party didn't want one, the people who voted for it did. And therefore, it created pressure on the party of government to consult the people, because it knew, rather than taking power itself, that actually, if it allowed the people to vote, they would get the outcome that they wanted. And it's exactly the same in the Western Cape. So here we have the DA, who are opposed to Cape independence, but 79% of DA voters in the Western Cape want a referendum on Cape independence. 68% of the Western Cape people want a referendum. So our role is the same. We're not going to take over the Western Cape. We don't want to govern the Western Cape. We want to force the DA government that is governing the Western Cape to consult the people of the Western Cape on this issue democratically.
Now, the reason you're probably polling so high is this must fall squarely into that category of really sexy questions, right? When you put two people and you say, let's just make this an independent country. Western Cape, look how wonderful it is. We are much better than the rest of them, and we can keep those blacks out. It sounds like a really good thing, and people say, yes, we're all for it, without really understanding the ramifications. Now, there are massive ramifications to this, aren't there?
Well, I think there's a lot of assumptions there. So first of all, I get that you're just postulating. Keeping the blacks out is
I'm not postulating. That's the difference of the Western Cape and the rest of the country, isn't it? Is the makeup of the Western Cape? It is dramatically different. And so, in other words, everyone can hear the dog whistle. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be Dr. Seuss. We can understand the dog whistle. The dog whistle is, eventually what makes a person a citizen of the Western Cape compared to a person as a citizen of South Africa. So, in other words, if I suddenly decide, Cape has got independence, great, I'm now suddenly immigrating to the Western Cape. How are you going to do this? Right? Surely you're going to build a big border wall, one would imagine, and then you're going to try and keep people who aren't there out.
So look, I think it's really important that we understand that, first of all, that our mission is non-racial. And it's not a dog whistle. It's a recognition that the people of the Western Cape have a particular ideology, and I accept there's some correlation between the demographics of the Western Cape and that ideology. But those are just correlations. And absolutely, our own organisation has an exco which has people on it who are white, who are coloured, who are black. So this whole notion that somehow this is just overt racism is actually nonsensical, and you can see that in the election results. And I think it's we've got to be really sort of careful, not sort of just dismissing ideas and saying, hang on a second, this is just. I think too many ideas are closed down with this kind of talk of racism. The bottom line is we can see how the Western Cape people have voted. Now, actually, what do we see in terms of Cape independence? We do see differences in the level of supports across race, but we have, not all white people support Cape independence. I think support last time we measured was about 72% across white people. Not all black people oppose Cape independence. Support last time we checked was at 30%, and support amongst coloured people is at 80%. So this is not about one particular race. This is a particular ideology, and of course there is cultural and racial correlations between how people vote. But this is really not about race. In fact, I'm an avowed non-racialist, and we don't know each other well, but I mean, for argument's sake, one of the things that I often stand up for, I despise racism. I often get called racist. The last time we marched, we literally marched the District 6 Museum and stopped and prayed for forgiveness for the sins of our past. So, at the end of the day, that's not in our makeup. And I accept it's an easy thing to point. What we want is, here we are, 7 million people, 3.2 million voters. We're not getting the government that we want. And actually, we want to be governed according to our democratic will. I think it's too easy to kind of paint that as race, as opposed to just accepting that we're entitled to be governed the way that we want to be governed.
Well, you can say that you go out there, you actually do get the government that you want. You get, South Africa's got fairly strong federal laws. We understand that many of the competencies that fail the Western Cape as badly as they fail the rest of the country, safety and security, schooling, etc., are done at national level. We understand that to have somebody like Becky Taylor in charge of your police service, you're just asking for a crime wave, right? So we are all subject to that particular problem. But you point out the relative success of the Western Cape has got to be because it's governed differently, because we have quite a strong federal system in South Africa.
So we definitely don't have a strong federal system. We have what's called a quasi-federal system. We have the appearance of federalism, but if you go and look at Section 4 and Schedule 4 and Schedule 5 of the South African Constitution, and you see what powers the Western Cape government has, they're scant. And the key ones all belong at central government. So the Western Cape, do we set economic policy? No, we don't set economic policy. We have to implement the ANC's economic policy. Do we control policing? No, we don't. It's implemented by South Africa. Do we control our taxation and how our money is spent? No, we don't. That's decided by. Do we control our own borders? No, we don't. So actually, we have very, very little control over. So what we have in the Western Cape is we have a province that is relatively well administered, and certainly on the basis of that outperforms the rest of South Africa. But I mean, the DA, for argument's sake, strongly believe in non-racialism, but we have BEE and affirmative action. The DA were elected. Alan Winde was elected on the promise of trying to take control of policing. He got a mandate from the Western Cape people, but we don't have it, because what we have in the Western Cape is effectively a sort of this slightly sham of a government. They could do certain things, but all of the key decisions were made by people in Pretoria who the Western Cape people voted against and vehemently disliked.
So now, you've obviously played through a couple of scenarios. Tell us exactly how this breakup is going to happen, right? How do you determine who is a citizen of the Western Cape?
Sure. So look, by using international norms. So look, in terms of the process, let's kind of maybe start a little earlier than that, because then it'll have more context. So we have a referendum, and the people of the Western Cape vote to leave. We wake up the next day, and now the Western Cape government has been mandated or instructed by its people to negotiate the exit of the Western Cape from South Africa, and now it needs to enter into a negotiation with the South African government, which then effectively takes everybody's interests in part, and we find a fair settlement settlement that perhaps is a compromise that everybody can live with, and that would be the norm, or how it's supposed to work. Doesn't always work that way. So we end up with this negotiated settlement. The people of the Western Cape, whoever is living legally in the Western Cape, will be entitled to become a citizen. Yeah, and
so what is living? I mean, many people have holiday homes. Are they living in the Western Cape?
No, look. I think that's one of the definitions that'll have to be defined. But I would probably suggest that something on the lines of anybody who had their registered first address, where they're registered to vote at the last election. That would something along those lines would be something that wasn't arbitrary, but that was fair. It's important that it's fair, it's transparent, it's non-racial, and bear in mind that sort of these protocols are relatively well established. Now, obviously, secession is more difficult, but if we talk about citizenship and who's entitled to be a citizen of South Africa and who isn't, it's a fairly clear process. Now, South Africa might not implement its own laws very well, but it's got very clear laws, and those laws, if you go and look at them, are remarkably similar to all of the other G20 countries, for an example. There's kind of an international norm of how do you define citizenship, and we would see the Western Cape just complying with those international norms and probably having a very, very similar set of criteria to those that South Africa currently has, albeit that we'd expect the Western Cape to actually implement its own laws.
Okay, so we wake up the next morning and everybody's decided this is a hell of a good idea. How do you plan on securing your northern border and your eastern border? As I see it, it's going to be interesting the next day.
Sure. Look, and it's going to be. Look, the next day there won't be independence, and we're going to have to certainly we're going to have to see where we end up with that. Securing borders is a challenge for every country on earth, and is the Western Cape going to have challenges securing its borders both after the referendum and I think and long term? It absolutely will, like every other country. If you're a successful country and you've got less successful countries next door, people will always try to migrate towards success. And ultimately, you know that's something that countries will have to manage, and they have to manage as fairly, as reasonably as they can. What I would say is, first of all, we can't possibly make a worse job of how South Africa is currently managing its borders now. They're completely non-existent. So are we going to be any worse than we've got now? And clearly, if we have control of law and order within the province, then part of that is not just getting over the border, but it's also then being able to sort of carry out your business as an illegal alien in the country, and those two things go together. So are we going to have is there some magic bullet? No. Is it going to be problematic? Yes. Ultimately, what is the argument? You're going to be so successful as an independent country that you shouldn't try. Ultimately, yes, it's a challenge that we're going to have to live up with. But the very fact that everybody, whatever their position on Cape independence, says if you get independence, everybody's going to try and go there, actually is surely the greatest testimony for why we need Cape independence, because everybody accepts we're going to make an absolute rip-roaring success of it, and it's going to be fundamentally better than South Africa.
Well, it's certainly going to be better than some of its near neighbours, and you do have an influx of people, for example, from the Eastern Cape. So
Sure.
You are going to be inundated with about 5 million people, pretty soon thereafter. If you do get that, but I presume that is not really what you want. What you have in mind, I presume, is to maintain your enclave that you've got right now.
I wouldn't call it an enclave. I would call it a province that has a population. And when it comes to the Eastern Cape, it's obviously a sensitive subject and one that has to be sort of handled with some diplomacy. But we already have more than 1 million people have migrated from the Eastern Cape to the Western Cape already, and many of those have illegally settled land in the Western Cape, and that is an issue that the Western Cape people and the Western Cape taxpayers are currently having to deal with. Now, I would far rather look at a lot of these problems and say, well, how do we find a better solution? So, one of the things, and I'm talking personally now, because I have to say that the referendum party is a single issue party, and therefore, we are pushing for a referendum and to give control to the people of the Western Cape. But one of the things that I think in that negotiation, I believe that the Western Cape is currently a contributor towards South Africa. We pay about 30%, about 35% is our net contribution of our income to South Africa. And there is absolutely an issue in the Eastern Cape, because the Eastern Cape is one of the poorest and the worst run provinces and the most unequal, I think, in South Africa. And understandably, the people are there who are wanting a better life. And I actually would love to see the Western Cape, an independent Western Cape, playing a developmental role in the Eastern Cape. And actually, rather than saying, how do we keep all of these poor people out? How about we take an approach that says, look, hold on a second, we've been paying into the system for years, rather than just building a wall and sort of trying to defend it with guns. Why do we play a developmental role in understanding the relationship between the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape? And actually, why don't we do something positive that also helps uplift the Eastern Cape? So I think that's part of these. So I see these negotiations after a referendum as something that are inherently positive. And when you negotiate, you should never negotiate for a win-lose. You should negotiate for a win-win. We need to find, at the end of this referendum, we need to find a solution that actually is going to benefit everybody.
I must admit, though, Phil, I can't help thinking that of that 30% tax contribution that the Western Cape is making, I'm not 100% sure you and your people have factored in the fact that you're going to get initially it may not change overnight, but pretty soon all your activity in your ports, all your your ready market for your wine, your ready market for your agricultural products, tariffs, etc., from both sides, fees and tariffs are going to come into play. A lot of that market's going to change.
Well, look, I think first of all, one of the things that I think that's going to happen, and when we talk, look, we have spent a lot of time talking to economists, and I think the general consensus amongst economists is that the Western Cape should effectively set itself up as a giant special economic zone, and will absolutely prosper. And we already have this situation where the Western Cape has fundamentally different trading partners. The main trading partners of the Western Cape are not the main trading partners of the rest of South Africa. So we already have a very different economy, and I think the Western Cape is going to prosper. And are there going to be some changes? But I mean, we've got to bear in mind that the relationship between South Africa and the Western Cape, trade-wise, is symbiotic, and it's going to continue to be symbiotic. And quite right, we don't have a big mining industry in the Western Cape. We have tourism, we have fintech, we have some agri. We've got renewable energy increasingly. So the Western Cape is going to have its own economy. And I think we can look, one of the best examples of that, is perhaps an extreme one, is Singapore. Now, Singapore is absolutely minuscule. The Western Cape is 1 million square kilometres. The Singapore is 800. And Singapore, when it got its independence I think it was 65, early 60s at least, its economy was 1/20th of the size of South Africa. By 2019, Singapore had a bigger economy from those 800 square kilometres than all of South Africa. And so to think that the Western Cape can't absolutely prosper and somehow is dependent entirely on South Africa is probably a naive interpretation. I think we must give the people of the Western Cape much more credit than that.
Well, Phil, I must say that the examples that you mentioned, certainly in my case, you struggle to sway me. I think that the easy thing with a sexy proposition like, let's just have a tax boycott, let's just get independence. It sounds wonderful, but a lot of those things end in tears, which, I think that, look, I don't think your mission is going to end in tears, because I don't think it's going to be a starter. So, as far as I can see, you'd be better off spending that time trying to get to better solutions at a political level in South Africa. But as far as independence goes, I don't see how it can work. But best of luck anyway, and thank you for coming to the State of the Nation. And to anybody that's watching us today, tell us what you think. It's a sexy topic, and it sounds hell of a great. But to me, it's a dog whistle. I hear a dog whistle, and maybe I'm just getting sensitive ears as I get older. Phil Craig, leader of the referendum party, looking to move the Western Cape to be the world's newest independent country. Good luck with that. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today. To everybody that joined us, thank you so much. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you the next time on the State of the Nation. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you.